Yeah, I think so. This is going to be our last virtual event for the year.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's pretty exciting, but feels like a big accomplishment to have gotten through the year.
Good, good.
All right. I think we're all good to go. I'm going to just give people some time to join. Oh, we have a question already. Oh, yeah. Somebody letting us know that they can see and hear clearly. That's great.
Good.
Okay. So since a lot of people are joining, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Elisa. I'm the events coordinator at Politics and Prose Bookstore, and I would like to welcome you to PNP Live. I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight in this virtual format. Your support means a lot to us, whether it's for, in-person events, virtual events, or any of the other programs that we provide. We're very grateful for you all. At any point during the event, you can click on the link in the chat to purchase Disability Pride on the Politics and Prose website. And then additionally, you can ask Ben questions by clicking on the Q&A link, which is at the bottom of the screen. And so you'll enter your questions there. And while we'll try to get to everyone's questions, we apologize in advance if we don't have time to get to yours. We're also providing closed captions. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's a link that says CC, and you can click there to access the closed captions. And just thank you again for being here with us today. We are so thankful to our family of loyal customers for keeping our business and our spirits afloat. And now I would like to welcome to PNP Live Ben Mattlin, celebrating the release of his book, Disability Pride, Dispatches from a Post-ADA World. In Disability Pride, disabled journalist Ben Mattlin weaves together interviews and reportage to introduce a cavalcade of individuals, ideas, and events in engaging, fast-paced prose. He traces the generation that came of age after the ADA reshaped America and how it is influencing the future. He documents how autistic self-advocacy and the neurodiversity movement upended views of those whose brains work differently. He lifts the veil on a thriving disability culture, from social media to high fashion, Hollywood to Broadway, showing how the politics of beauty for those with marginalized body types and facial features is sparking widespread change. Ben Mattlin is a journalist, essayist, and author. Born with spinal muscular atrophy, a congenital muscle weakness, he has been a lifelong wheelchair user. His books include Miracle Boy Grows Up and In Sickness and in Health. His work has appeared in the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, USA Today, Vox, and on NPR, among others. He lives in Los Angeles, California, and you can follow him at Ben Mattlin on Twitter. So please welcome to PNP Live, Ben Mattlin.
Great. Thank you for having me. I am very happy to be here with you all. Let me start by describing my appearance for those who can't see. I'm an old white guy with graying hair and not enough of it, wearing tortoiseshell glasses and a headset microphone, a pink button shirt under a dark brown jacket. There's a blue cushion behind my head, and behind me are bookshelves and assorted mess. I am learning to introduce myself that way in, Zoom things, because access is not just about ramps. Something I had to learn. Well, let me back up a bit. I was born with my disability. I've never walked. I've never stood. It's a progressive weakness. I'm not able to feed myself anymore. I control my computer by voice. I drive my wheelchair with a teeny little joystick I can control with my lips, but but I've always really felt very fortunate. I grew up in a family that had the financial and emotional resources to give me a pretty normal life, really. And I kind of had, expectations for how my life would be. Um, I started college the very year that federally funded institutions and private universities that uh, receive federal tuition grants had to become accessible for disabled folks like me. In other words, I was a direct and immediate beneficiary of the disability rights movement that had really happened when I was younger, and I wasn't all that aware of it. That was 1980. That was before the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. So when I graduated from college and I couldn't get a job, well, it was still legal to discriminate against people like me. And I began to pay more attention to the disability rights movement. I thought, hey, maybe they're onto something. There's this discrimination thing, it's real. And it doesn't need to be that way. So I got a bit involved. Uh, I've always liked writing, so I wrote op-eds, some of which were published, in support of disability rights. I went to community meetings and gave testimony, as we called it, about discrimination, about how my life had been. When the ADA passed in July of 1990, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was impossible. I thought I would never see this happen. I was, what was I? 27, I guess, 27 years old. And I had a bit of a wonder about it, about wow, the things that people can do. But around that time, I got married. And a little while later, we had kids. And I still struggled to work, to make a career for myself. In other words, I got busy with the rest of my life. And I kind of lost touch with a lot of the disability community, the activism. I even got to the point where I began to think that maybe the younger generation were kind of resting on their laurels, on the stuff that my generation and the one before me had achieved for disabled people. And, nobody cared anymore. They took these things for granted, these civil rights protections. To be clear, the ADA was not about charity. It was a civil rights act. It was sort of fashioned on and inspired by the Civil Rights Act of '64. It was, we had to demand access for things. It wasn't given to us. It wasn't doing a favor. It essentially said there is a big minority group out there, and they've been treated unfairly, and that shouldn't happen anymore. So that was a big deal. But what happened since then? So about 5 years ago, I saw online that there was a big billboard in Times Square for Olay beauty products. And the model in the big ad was a woman with a disability very similar to mine. And I thought, wow, that's different. That's new. Around the same time, other models with highly visible disabilities began appearing in fashion magazines and catalogs and stuff. Uh, Modeling fancy designer clothes and lingerie and cosmetics. It wasn't just full inclusion, as we used to say. It wasn't just, integration or equal access. These models were representing beauty, desirability, objects of desire, uh, fantasies, even. And I thought, how did they get there? How did the gatekeepers of fashion, decide to, to open the doors to this kind of representation? Around the same time, there was a popular ABC series, sitcom called Speechless, about a family, but there's a young man in the family in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy, played by an actor in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy. That was unprecedented. I mean, there'd been disabled characters in media before, rarely played by actually disabled actors. And if they were, they were, well, a bit sappy, a bit inspirational. And this was just a sitcom, a typical goofy family. It ran for 3 seasons, did very well. Then there was another show on Netflix called Special, also a young man with CP. About a year later, a woman with paraplegia wins the Tony Award for Oklahoma. Again, not for playing a pitiful creature at all, but a town's flirt in a musical comedy. Again, unprecedented. So all in all, I thought, something's going on here. Something has changed. I don't know what it is, but it's not just a fluke. And I realized a whole generation of disabled people had come of age since the ADA. They'd come of age with a sense of entitlement, of deserving, basic civil rights protections that I never had. And by the way, these images were spread, far and wide on the internet. I began seeing more selfies of people, showing their prosthetic limbs or, whatever, their apparatus, wheelchairs, crutches, colostomy bags, whatever. People were out there not saying, I'm shy, don't look at me. They're saying, look at me. This is cool and you should see. So I set about connecting the dots from my experience of disability and of disability rights movement to the way things are now for this, younger generation. I interviewed as many disabled folks as, would talk to me or email with me or whatever, who were, mostly under 40, 40 years old. Well, I couldn't connect with somebody personally. I read stuff that had been posted in blogs and other articles and interviews. And I learned to reacquaint myself with the community and with the causes that people are active about today. Hang on a second. Have a sip. Um, my mouth is a bit dry. Thank you. Thank you. I'm back. Uh, what did I learn? The ADA itself is a remarkable document. It's very broad and inclusive. It covers employers and stores and public transportation, but it's got some big gaps. And that's been a problem people are facing. Getting the ideas behind the ADA enforced. For one, you're not going to get a ticket for access violations. You have to be sued. I have to go to the store and say, hey, no ramp. I'm going to sue you, which makes me look like a crank. But that's what I have to do to get, the ADA put into effect. That's a problem. But that's the only way it's enforced, through the courts. Subsequent cases have helped define some of the terms a little better, what counts, who's covered under the ADA and who isn't. That's been mostly good. But there are still gaps. One of my pet peeves is airplanes. If I try to board a city bus in almost any city in the US, chances are the bus driver will stop, a lift, a ramp will come down. I can board the bus. Maybe a seat will have to flip up so I can park my chair with everybody else. And that's it. I can go somewhere. Not true in an airplane. Airplanes got an exemption from the ADA. They have certain rules, but they're nowhere near as strict as, for other forms of transportation. So that's a problem. I don't fly anywhere. It's too difficult until it becomes possible. And I believe someday it will. I'm not going anywhere. That's a problem. Native American reservations are exempt, as they are from all federal laws. So, casinos or whatever on reservations don't have to be accessible. But there are other problems that the law just can't cover. On the one hand, as people say, you can't legislate attitudes, right? I mean, people are going to do nasty things, whether it's legal or not. But beyond that, in the early 2000s, a group of mostly disabled people of color, queer and non-binary disabled folks, came together to start an initiative they called disability justice. Basically saying, there are issues that non-white, non-straight, or cisgender disabled people face that people with intersectional identities uh, deal with that are not covered by the law, cannot be covered by the law. Uh, I hesitate a bit talking about this because, I am a cisgender white guy. It's not almost really not appropriate for me to talk about it, but it's part of the community I've come to know. Uh, People who face a sort of extra level of discrimination and feel that the only solution to it will never come through the legal system. Uh, Many of them say that uh, the whole capitalist system that we live in is inherently ableist. The idea that you have to compete with other people and establish your value through your work, your industry, your output. That's not uh, something a lot of disabled folks don't fit into that. And they count just the same. They matter just as much by virtue of being human beings, regardless of what they can achieve or how they can make money or not. I think there's some important lessons to learn from these folks. In the last 32 years, the understanding of neurodiversity, of autism, of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, a range of less visible disabilities we've come to understand and to talk about in terms of access needs and accommodations, the way my generation talked about reasonable accommodations for, wheelchair users and deaf people and blind people. Well, people whose brains work differently may need accommodations as well, should be accommodated as well. When I started my research, I knew there'd been a movement for autistic self-advocacy, but I realized I didn't know how they felt about being included in the disability community. I thought maybe it's a separate thing, Boy, I mean, a lot of their activism has been based on the model of disability rights. So all in all, I would say that my understanding, my appreciation of the disability community at large, who is in it, what kinds of situations are, counted, has expanded greatly. The CDC estimates there's something like 61 million disabled American adults, not counting children, roughly a quarter of the population. When you think about the recent addition of perhaps as many as 20 million Americans with long COVID, our numbers are huge, and people may not welcome that identity. People may not want to acknowledge themselves as having disabilities, being disabled, but I would urge the newly disabled to seek out people like themselves, to look into the community. Uh, you know, doctors and, dare I say, books are great, but there's nothing better than other people in your community who know what you're going through, know where you've been, and kind of give you a sense of what to expect. We are our own best resource. Funny enough, it was a piece a few years ago at the number of college students who identify as disabled now. It's something like 1 in 4. It used to be 1 in 10, maybe 10 years ago. A lot of them have been diagnosed with learning disabilities and stuff like that. Uh, but the lesson, the message I get from that is that the label disabled is not as stigmatizing as it was. People are willing, some eager, to lay claim to being, part of that group. And not just for the parking permits. Uh, it's 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 a recognition. It's not just a diagnosis, but a realization of something maybe that somebody struggles with, and begin to understand what you need to cope better, and to ask for those accommodations. So that's kind of, to me, that's the dream of the movement, is, not seeing disabled people as them, us and them kind of thing, but it's just a factor of human diversity. As they say, anybody can become disabled at any time, and the older you get, chances are better. Most older folks have some disability or another, and we don't need to feel ashamed of that. It is a normal thing. It should be acceptable, expected almost. That's why I called the book Disability Pride, because as I interview people, I kept coming back to that question. How did you get to a point where you felt like you could do these things? You could represent high fashion, or appear on TV, or just, hold a job that meant something to you, that mattered, or even not. Just cope, come to terms with yourself, and build self-esteem. And everyone I spoke to, I think without exception, said, well, it was a journey, I didn't always feel that way. A lot of people, the internet helped. I got online, they'd say, and I found I'm not some weirdo. There are other people out there like me dealing with the same stuff I deal with. And that felt great. And I wanted more people to know that. I wanted to spread that message. This is what people told me. And I realized I've kind of gone through a bit of it myself, you know. I was always a arrogant so and so, but I've had my moments. I still do of feeling bad about myself, guilty for things I can't do, and grateful uh, when I'm allowed to do things that other people do. But we shouldn't have to feel that way. Uh, we shouldn't have to pretend, you know, that we're less disabled than we are. We shouldn't have to work hard, work quite so hard at accommodating other people's discomforts. Uh, you know, maybe our society could still do a better job of accommodating people who are different, who have different kinds of needs. Um, I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. Obviously, tremendous progress has been made. How long will it last? I don't know. Maybe forever. You know, once it's been done, can't go back. Uh, but there is still so far to go. I don't know. I could go on and on. The things I learned, uh, if I leave something out, someone will be mad at me. You know, there are a lot of issues with institutionalization, which continue to this day. Uh, there are healthcare disparities, uh, economic disparities, uh, on and on. Uh, we hope, I think, we all hope that by improving the representation of disabilities, of disabled people, we can start to move the needle, you know, change people's hearts and minds and attitudes. But uh, it's not enough, I guess. We there are still so many obstacles and injustices, and sometimes the consequences are quite dangerous. Uh, I have examples in my book. I mean, the woman who in a wheelchair got on an airplane. The wheelchair was damaged. It was a customized wheelchair. She had to ride it away, but it was damaged. It took so long to get it fixed. Ultimately, she died from injuries incurred from using the damaged wheelchair. There's a couple who went to the hospital during the worst of the COVID pandemic. And the woman recorded a conversation with the doctor. It's on YouTube, where he basically says, "We're not going to do everything for your husband. It's not worth it. Uh, his life isn't that valuable, and we have limited resources." And she said, "Oh, partly that may have been because we're Black, but I think it mostly was because he was disabled and he died." Uh, So yes, my book is full of horror stories, but there are also great joys. Uh, I spoke to a variety of professional comedians with disabilities who find, humor in a way, the unnatural ways that people react to disabilities. Uh, so, like any community, we're a bit of a mixed lot, you know? There are joys and there are struggles, and the fight goes on. I think I'm about out of time.
Hello. Yeah, I mean, now we have time for questions, so yeah. Thanks so much for that. Let's see. The first question we have here is from an anonymous attendee, who asks, what has been your experience or what is your opinion of how well students with disabilities who have received services under IDEA are
Mhm.
educated about ADA, and how do individuals become educated about their legal rights and ways to advocate for themselves? I'm assuming in the context of students, college
That's
students.
a good question. IDEA, of course, is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, which passed when I was, high school, I guess, already. So I never benefited from it. Uh, I'm not an expert on that, but there are. I, I'm I'm a journalist. I'm a reporter. I'm not really an advocate in that sense. There are people who know more about this, a lot more about this than I do. But as I understand it, in school, the parents and the school work together to form an IEP, an individual education plan, to help educate the student in the least restrictive environment possible, which is great. But what happens when you graduate? You're dropped from the system. One of the models I profiled in my book, Aaron Phillip, I first heard of her years ago when her therapist, her educational therapist, contacted me. What's going to happen when everyone graduates? Can you help get the word out? How can I do that? I proposed an article or two, but never got published. Well, fortunately, everyone's pretty extraordinary and was able to form a fashion career. So she got lucky, I guess. Uh, it is a problem. Uh, ADA resources. I mean, there are organizations, independent living centers that are supposed to help people understand. Uh, there are also a lot of lawyers who want to help you pursue ADA lawsuits, some of which are good, some of which maybe not so good. Um, I don't know. There's a lot of information online, certainly. Uh, and, the law can be tricky. But my understanding is you've got the right to accommodations and you need to speak up about them. You need to be clear what accommodations you need exactly. And if they, I don't know, cost too much or are extraordinary, then the employer or the shop or theater owner or whatever doesn't have to supply them. But if they're reasonable, then they do have to. Uh, and if they don't, then you call one of those lawyers, I guess.
All right. the next question says, as another anonymous attendee, says, do you find it difficult to build a sense of community or camaraderie with other disabled folks? And how would you advise someone who is newly disabled to get involved with the community or find these communities?
As for me personally, it was hard way back because I did not want to associate with other disabled people. That's part of that journey I was talking about self-esteem and disability pride. A lot of folks I talked to had a similar experience. I don't want anything to do with other disabled people. But it's great that this anonymous person wants to connect because it's very valuable. And the internet is a great resource. There are groups of all kinds, and I think most disabled folks are pretty friendly if you contact them and get in touch. It's a little hard to generalize, some groups are diagnosis specific, others are more general, sort of cross disability, pan disability. Kind of depends, I guess, where you are and what you're looking for. But it's a good idea to, reach out and try to connect.
All right, let's see. The next question is from another anonymous attendee, which says, you mentioned being somewhat disconnected to the disability community as you went about establishing your family and career. As a fellow disabled person, I've gone through similar periods of lower engagement. Was moving away from regular involvement in the disability community a conscious decision you made at the time? Did you feel any sort of absence then? And did you feel you missed out on something later when you started re-engaging and working on the book?
Wow, yeah. Good question. Well, it's kind of a mix for me. I guess, as I said, I got involved in nesting, having my family, and maybe I was a little tired of activism, but I did miss the community. A number of the folks I used to hang out with died. They were a little older than I am, and disabled people often have health problems. Anyway, so I did miss people who were no longer around. And to be honest, researching the book, I reacquainted myself with the community, but I was mostly, connecting with younger folks. I am at a distance from them. So, in a sense, I still feel a little bit alienated from the community at large because I don't know, because of the path I'm on and the stuff I've dealt with. There aren't a heck of a lot of folks my age with my disability around anymore. That sounds a bit gruesome, but I don't know. Probably if I were younger, I would connect better with more disabled people in the community. Yeah, I think.
I'm curious to know, how active on Twitter are you?
I like Twitter. I hope Musk doesn't destroy it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
There's a big disability community on Twitter, And, I'm a word guy. Twitter is basically words based, unlike Instagram. Uh, so I like Twitter, and I hope it continues.
Yeah, I definitely that, and that's exactly why I thought of that. I mean, it seems like disability rights issues became very like trending quickly on Twitter as soon as the Elon Musk takeover happened. Just a lot of
Yeah,
people worried about losing those networks that they built
yeah.
on Twitter specifically more than
Yeah,
any
I think
other
it's
social
true.
media platform.
I think you're right. Yeah.
And then we have a question from Eileen Kroll, who says, you mentioned the challenges of flying, which has led you to stop flying. What would you like to see happen in the airline industry, or how do you see us getting there?
There is a group called All Wheels Up that is actively advocating for letting wheelchairs on planes, uh, the way we can do on buses. It may only be one or two per flight, but it's a start. Uh, it actually is kind of fascinating that the airline will say, well, it's not safe. They've done crash tests where the basic mechanism to lock a wheelchair down is actually stronger in crash tests than your basic airplane seat and seatbelt. Uh, so that excuse doesn't fly. A wheelchair may take up space. You might have to lose a ticket. And of course, there's a bathroom issue. But I have a fantasy, having my own little private jet that I could just roll on and go anywhere and not have to deal with all the hassles. Because as it is now, I have to get lifted out of my wheelchair, transferred, to a plane seat, and the wheelchair is taken off into baggage. Uh, Smaller planes, it doesn't fit in baggage. And even the larger ones, it invariably gets damaged, comes back, and more like a pretzel in a wheelchair. So when I have flown, I bring a spare wheelchair, a lightweight manual chair that sometimes you can fold up and put in the closet in the cabin, just in case my power chair gets destroyed. Uh, but it's uncomfortable. It's awkward. There's the bathroom issue. Uh, there are a lot of problems. So, yeah, planes could be a lot more accessible.
Okay, the next question is from an anonymous attendee, and they ask, what was the process of writing like for you? What was the process of doing research like? What did you find most interesting? Or how did you go about writing about disabled groups that you do not identify with?
Mm. The hardest chapters were the parts of the community that I don't identify with. Uh, but I couldn't leave them out. Yeah. I didn't want to be speaking for them or seen to be trying to represent them. So my goal was to amplify what people were saying and writing in blogs, uh, not to speak for them. Uh, but they couldn't be left out. They're important parts of the narrative of the disability community. I wrote a lot of it during lockdown, although I started it before COVID. I was originally just going to write about some of these celebrities and the people I saw. And my publisher said, you really got to cover the whole community. I thought the whole community, that's huge. We did a lot of, outlining and reorganizing. And as I said, I realized that it had been a generation since the ADA. And that's when I kind of tweaked my idea to get a sense of uh, the ADA's successes and failures. Uh, nobody I talked to said, let's dump the ADA. Everybody loves the ADA. It's great, but it's not enough.
Oh, and this is just my question. You said you started writing the book before the pandemic. So
Yeah.
wow. what was what was like the biggest change that you felt the pandemic brought about in the writing process? Like did it change what subjects you decided to cover? Your writing process, so the length of time maybe? I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Well, on the one hand, it was great. We all had to be home. I could just write and nothing else to do. And other people were home. They would talk to me. So for a while, that was fabulous. But there is a chapter in the book about healthcare disparities. And the worst of the pandemic really brought some of those into very startling clarity. People, medical rationing, people being refused ventilators, or at least the possibility of having ventilators confiscated for others who might benefit from them. It was pretty awful, awful stuff. And in the various drafts, we debated, will COVID end? Will it never end? How much COVID goes in the book? So it's in there. But it also illustrates some of the healthcare disparities. So that was handy in the end. But we had to work with that a lot to make it fit appropriately.
Yeah. The next question is from another anonymous attendee. And they ask, do you feel that current representations, and you touched on this a little bit earlier, current representations of disabled people in media are accurate? And if so, are they actually conducive to disability justice?
That's a complicated question. uh, Many portrayals are getting better, I think. There is the potential for things to be, to be better than they used to be. Used to be impossible, I think. But got a long way to go. One person I interviewed talked about the gay rights movement and how quickly things could change when when psychiatrists started saying, this idea of homosexuality as a defect is wrong because I'm gay. All of a sudden it became removed a lot of the stereotypes and stigmas. And we certainly see that in TV and movies now. A lot of same-sex relationships, and as well as asexual people, and so forth. The full spectrum. Disabled people aren't quite there yet. Could happen, I think, maybe. And there are examples that give one hope.
Yeah,
But,
and I
yeah, I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
Well, people in media pointed out to me too, it's not just the folks in front of the camera. You got to have people in charge, the decision makers, the writers, producers, uh, with disabilities who get that there are stories to tell, honest uh, representations of disabled lives. Uh, the disability doesn't have to be the point of the story. It's often best, I think, when it's, just part of the mix, part of the background. Uh, but it should definitely be included, and it would help if more of the just had disability experiences.
Right. And I
That
mean,
sounds like a threat.
maybe. Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier that a lot of it is driven by like how much these companies can profit off of said representation as well.
The fact that I have this book out, there have been at least three other good disability books this fall alone. And that tells me maybe publishers are starting to realize there is a market.
Absolutely. I think we have time maybe for this one last question. I'm so sorry if we didn't get to yours, to our attendees, but this will be the last one. And it
They
says,
can always email me.
yeah,
I'm pretty open.
or at you on Twitter.
Okay.
um, let's see. It says, what do you think of the disabled people who sue multiple establishments for ADA violations that have been accused of profiting from it?
I don't want to get too political, but I was glad that, what's his name? Lexalt lost in Nevada when he was, I believe, Attorney General. He accused a number of people of being like chronic ADA sewers, and people are not getting rich from ADA lawsuits. Uh, Not the lawyers or the litigants. Uh, yeah, some people may, I don't know. I'm not that litigious. Uh, I've only tried once to sue someplace. Uh, but once you start to notice them, there are so many violations that even if a few lawsuits are frivolous, I think it's a small price to pay. Uh, I ask any disabled person. There's a lot of rage at the continued access barriers, and I think most of us would say, "Go for it, sue, sue, sue," uh, if that's what it takes. Uh, Again, it shouldn't have to be that way. We shouldn't be put in a position of being whiners and trying.
Looks like we might have a bit of a connection error. Uh-oh. Let's see. There we go.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I don't know. Something weird happened with the internet connection, I guess.
Yeah, I didn't mine went out. Ooh.
Ah. Well, that's all right. I'm
Okay,
just
we're
glad you were
back.
able to hop back on. Yeah. I think it cut you off, but you were saying. I don't know.
What was I saying? We were talking about lawsuits. Was that
Yes, yes,
what I was saying?
yes.
You know, there's most disabled people, I dare say, have so much, rage at the lack of access that still exists. Uh, can't blame people for suing, even if there are some frivolous suits. Small price to pay for asserting, for our civil rights. Uh, it's not good that we have to be put in a position of complainers and troublemakers. But if that's what it takes to get our legally protected rights, then go for it. I'm all for it.
Absolutely. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was really great.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
It
a
was fun.
fantastic way to close out our virtual events for the year. So just a quick
Thank you to all your
reminder.
listeners.
Oh
Sorry.
yeah, no, please. Yes, thank you to everybody who was able to attend tonight. A quick reminder, you can purchase the book using the link which we've posted in the chat a few times. So you'll catch it there. You can also just go straight to our website and look for it there. And I also would like to say thank you for your continued support, as your patronage is what enables us to bring you programming like this, and we wouldn't be able to host these types of events without the book sales to support them. So please support Ben Mattlin and PNP by using that link to purchase the book. You can also check out our website for our most current and updated listings. We don't have that many more events for 2023, but for 2022, but our 2023 calendar is slowly being populated. So keep an eye out for that. And we hope to see you all at our upcoming events. Thank you again, Ben. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And have a great night. Stay well read,
Super.
everyone.